Amara could hardly believe what she had just heard. Just days before her wedding, in the middle of bustling Makuta, her parents had casually told her that the farmland her late grandfather had left her, the one place she had always dreamed of turning into her own home, was sold. And not just sold, but sold to pay for her younger sister Zuri's marriage into a rich family. They smiled as they said it, as if expecting her to nod and understand that her duty was to support Zuri's happiness. The shock hit her like a punch to the stomach. Everything she had imagined for herself, every plan she had made for the future, felt ripped away in an instant. She tried to keep calm in front of everyone, but inside, her heart was breaking. That night, she sat alone in her room, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face, wondering if she should call off the wedding altogether. Jabari, her fiancé, had noticed her quiet sadness but didn't push. He was patient, watching, learning. Over the next few days, while Amara pretended to join in the celebrations and hide her hurt, Jabari quietly began to move. He met with lawyers, signed papers, and made arrangements no one suspected. Then, on the wedding day, right after they exchanged vows, he stepped forward with a smile. He handed her the deed to a sprawling luxury estate and controlling shares in his family's trading company, all hers. The crowd gasped. Her parents' faces turned pale. Zuri's new husband, who had hoped to gain from arrogance and greed, looked humiliated. Amara's heart swelled, not just with wealth, but with pride, love, and the sweet taste of justice finally served. Amara sat at the long, glittering table, her fingers twisted tightly around the edge of her napkin, trying to look calm while inside, her heart was pounding. The engagement dinner was supposed to be a happy celebration, but from the moment she entered the grand hall, she felt like an outsider in her own family. Her parents were radiant, smiling as if nothing had happened, and they raised their glasses for a toast. To Zuri and her marriage into wealth, her father said, his voice full of pride. Applause and clinking glasses filled the room, but Amara felt a cold wave of humiliation wash over her. Every cheer seemed to mock her, a reminder that her dreams, her inheritance, and her place in the family had been quietly stolen without a word. She forced herself to smile politely, nodding along, but her hands were clenched so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She wanted to scream, to stand up and tell everyone how unfair it was, but she swallowed the words, knowing that nothing she said could undo the betrayal. Across the table, Jabari noticed. He saw the trembling in her hands, the tight line of her jaw, and the faint quiver in her smile. He didn't speak, didn't move, not yet. Instead, he let the moment stretch, letting Amara feel the weight of the shame and anger, letting her see that he understood every ounce of her pain. His eyes were calm, steady, and full of a quiet promise. That silent understanding was all the comfort she could cling to in that moment, a small shield against the public humiliation. The dinner continued with laughter and chatter, but Amara felt every word of praise for Zuri like a knife in her chest. Guests commented on Zuri's luxurious wedding plans and her handsome, rich fiancé, while her own dreams were quietly dismissed. Each toast, each compliment, each flash of the chandelier seemed to shine a spotlight on her loss. She felt invisible and yet painfully exposed at the same time, trapped in a golden cage of polite smiles and whispered congratulations. By the end of the night, her stomach twisted, her energy drained, and her pride bruised. She excused herself to the garden, needing a moment to breathe, to gather her thoughts. Jabari followed a few steps behind, silent but unwavering, watching as she leaned against the stone balustrade, staring at the city lights below, trying to keep herself from breaking. She felt small, humiliated, and powerless, but Jabari's presence reminded her that she was not alone. As they stood together in the quiet night, Amara realized that the world had tried to diminish her, but someone she loved had noticed. Someone was already thinking, planning, quietly plotting the turn of events that would shift the power back to her. In that moment, a spark of hope ignited within her. She didn't yet know the full plan, but she could feel it forming, like the first hint of sunlight before a storm clears. And for the first time that evening, a small, defiant smile tugged at her lips. Amara returned home that night feeling hollow, the laughter and toasts from the engagement dinner still ringing in her ears. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest, making it hard to breathe. She wandered from room to room, unable to sit still, her thoughts spinning over the betrayal she had endured. Her inheritance, her grandfather's farmland, had been sold without her consent, and her parents had celebrated her sister's gain as if it were their greatest achievement. Every plan she had made for the future, every dream she had held close, felt ripped away in a single cruel stroke. She found herself sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the wedding dress she had picked out months ago, wondering how she could possibly stand at the altar and smile when her heart felt shattered. The thought crossed her mind again and again, maybe she should call off the wedding. Maybe she should refuse to step into a life where her happiness and dignity were so easily ignored. She clutched her pillow, hiding her face, and let the tears fall, quiet but unrelenting. She tried to keep her sorrow hidden from Jabari, not wanting to burden him, not wanting to reveal how broken she felt, but grief has a way of speaking even when you try to silence it. From the other room, Jabari heard her soft cries. He didn't rush in or ask questions. Instead, he stood in the doorway, watching quietly, his mind already working. He saw the pain, the betrayal, the uncertainty, and he understood that words alone would not be enough to fix it. That night, while Amara wept, he began to form a plan, a careful, silent strategy to reclaim her dreams and protect her dignity. He thought about lawyers, properties, shares, ways to turn the tables on everyone who had tried to hurt her. Each idea built on the last, forming a web of possibilities that would not only restore what she had lost but also elevate her in ways she could never have imagined. Amara finally fell asleep, exhausted from grief, unaware that someone she trusted had already begun moving the pieces of her future into place. Her heart was broken, but it would not stay that way for long. Jabari's quiet determination and careful plotting were about to turn the story of betrayal and humiliation into one of triumph and vindication. In the silent darkness of her room, a transformation was already underway, even if Amara could not yet see it, and the life she had feared was lost was about to be reborn, stronger, brighter, and entirely hers. While the city of Makuta buzzed with excitement for the upcoming wedding, Jabari moved quietly, unseen, and unnoticed. To everyone around him, he was the perfect fiancé, smiling politely at family gatherings, laughing at the right moments, and standing loyally by Amara's side as if nothing was wrong. But behind that calm exterior, he was working tirelessly, driven by a single purpose, to protect Amara and restore what had been taken from her. Each day, while the celebrations continued and her parents flaunted their triumph over Zuri's wealthy engagement, Jabari met with lawyers in discreet offices, signing papers and securing deeds, making arrangements for assets that would change everything. He studied the legal documents carefully, double-checking every clause, every condition, making sure nothing could go wrong. He called trusted financial advisors, negotiated quietly with business partners, and mapped out each step with precision. Even Amara, who trusted him completely, had no idea of the full extent of what he was doing. She saw his calm, his patience, and his gentle smiles, believing he was simply supporting her, unaware that he was quietly weaving a plan that would shift the balance of power entirely. Each evening, after the meetings and paperwork were done, he returned home, still cheerful, still attentive, sharing meals and laughter with Amara as if the past week had been normal. She confided in him sometimes, talking about her sadness and frustration, still keeping the betrayal close to her chest. Jabari listened, comforted her, and let her speak, all while silently building the foundation for a revelation that would leave everyone stunned. Even when attending family gatherings or engagement parties, he stayed composed, nodding politely as her parents boasted about Zuri's marriage and their supposed cleverness. Inside, he was calculating every detail, imagining the moment when the tables would turn, when Amara's dignity would be fully restored, and her parents' arrogance would crumble in front of the very people they hoped to impress. By the end of the week, everything was ready. Every document signed, every asset secured, every plan meticulously laid out. Jabari's patience and careful preparation meant that not a single detail was left to chance. The wedding would go on as planned, the festivities would continue, and everyone would believe nothing was amiss. But when the right moment came, the surprise would be undeniable. Amara would gain what was hers, her parents' deceit would be exposed, and those who thought they had the upper hand would finally understand the cost of underestimating her, and him. The city would watch, jaws would drop, and Amara would step into a future she had never dared to imagine, all because Jabari had quietly turned the wheels behind the scenes, unseen and unstoppable. The day of the wedding arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the grand windows of the hall, casting a warm glow on guests dressed in their finest. Amara moved down the aisle in her flowing dress, her heart heavy but trying to hold on to a fragile hope. The room was full of smiling faces, clinking glasses, and polite congratulations, but the shadows of betrayal still lingered in her mind. Her parents sat proudly at the front, their smiles wide, unaware of the storm that was about to sweep through their carefully staged celebration. Jabari walked beside her, calm and confident, his hands steady in hers, his eyes reflecting a quiet determination that Amara could feel even if she didn't fully understand it yet. The vows were exchanged with the usual promises of love and commitment. Amara's voice trembled slightly, but she spoke with sincerity, feeling the weight of the past weeks lift ever so slightly as she clutched Jabari's hands. Guests smiled, some teared up, and the atmosphere seemed perfect, almost normal. Then Jabari took a deep breath and stepped forward, catching everyone off guard. A hush fell over the room. He smiled at Amara and said, "I have a gift for my new wife." From his pocket, he pulled a neatly folded set of documents. Murmurs spread across the hall as he held them high. "This," he announced, "is the deed to a sprawling luxury estate in the capital, and these are controlling shares in my family's trading company. They are all yours, Amara, in your name alone." The crowd froze. Amara's eyes widened in shock, unable to speak at first. Her parents' smiles faltered, turning slowly into expressions of disbelief and panic. Guests whispered and gasped, unsure if they had heard correctly. The power of the moment was electric. Jabari continued, his voice steady and clear, showing no hint of hesitation. "This is for the woman I love, who deserves every dream she's ever had, and more." Amara felt tears prick her eyes, a mix of relief, awe, and joy surging through her. All the humiliation, the betrayal, and the secret pain she had carried for weeks seemed to vanish in that instant. She looked at Jabari, realizing the depth of his love, his careful planning, and his commitment to her dignity above all else. Her parents tried to speak, to regain control, but the atmosphere had shifted completely. The guests were cheering, some even whistling, caught up in the drama and the triumph unfolding before them. Amara felt a rush of pride and empowerment she had never known. In a single moment, the narrative of her life had changed, and the tables had turned. The wedding that had once felt like a stage for her humiliation had become the stage for her victory, her joy, and the beginning of a life where she would never again be underestimated or controlled. And through it all, Jabari stood by her side, the silent architect of her liberation, smiling as she finally embraced the future she deserved. Just when the guests were beginning to absorb the shock of Jabari's grand gift, he raised his hand for silence, his eyes scanning the room with quiet intensity. A deeper hush fell over the hall, and everyone turned to him, sensing that more was coming. Jabari's voice was calm but charged with meaning as he spoke. "There is something important everyone should know about this estate." All eyes were on him, and even Amara's parents leaned forward, suddenly uneasy. He paused for effect, letting the tension build, and then revealed the truth. The luxurious estate and shares were purchased using funds from a high-profile business deal, a deal that Zuri's new husband had desperately tried to secure, only to fail because of his own arrogance. Gasps erupted across the room. Whispers ran like wildfire as people processed the revelation. Zuri's groom, who had strutted through the engagement dinner as if he had conquered the world, now looked pale and humiliated. His confident smile vanished, replaced by a tight, forced expression as the crowd realized the irony. He had lost not because of misfortune or competition, but because of his own reckless pride. Murmurs of disbelief grew louder, and some guests exchanged knowing glances, quietly enjoying the public spectacle. Amara stood beside Jabari, stunned at first, but as the pieces fell into place, her chest swelled with pride. The man she loved hadn't just restored her dignity and given her a new life, he had orchestrated a public lesson in humility for those who had tried to belittle her. Her parents' faces mirrored shock and confusion, their carefully maintained composure crumbling under the weight of the truth. The power in the room had shifted completely. Zuri's new husband looked around helplessly, realizing that the very people he thought he could impress now saw him for what he was. The whispers turned into a low murmur of approval for Jabari's cleverness and generosity, as guests began to understand the brilliance of the move. Some of them even cheered quietly, impressed by how elegantly Jabari had handled the situation, turning a personal gift into a dramatic, public triumph. Amara's heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. The humiliation she had suffered, the betrayal she had endured, now seemed distant, almost surreal. She squeezed Jabari's hand, grateful not only for his love but for his wisdom and courage. Together, they had flipped the script entirely. The estate was more than just property, and the shares were more than business power, they were symbols of justice, victory, and the recognition of her worth. For the first time in a long while, Amara felt fully seen, fully respected, and fully free. And as the crowd murmured, gasped, and whispered, she realized she was no longer a silent victim in someone else's story. She was the heroine of her own life, and the public unmasking of greed and arrogance had made that truth impossible to ignore. Amara's parents scrambled, their faces pale, hands waving as they tried to explain, justify, or smooth over the disaster unfolding before them. But it was too late. The guests had already seen the truth, and the humiliation was permanent. Every whispered conversation, every shocked glance, was a reminder that their attempts to control Amara had backfired spectacularly. The room, once filled with polite smiles and forced celebration, now buzzed with admiration for Jabari's cleverness and respect for Amara's strength. Outside the hall, reporters had already begun calling, taking photos, and posting updates that spread across social media like wildfire. The story of the stolen inheritance, the secret gift, and the public unmasking of Zuri's husband became a sensation. People marveled at how gracefully Amara had been protected, how quietly Jabari had planned everything, and how completely the tables had been turned. In that moment, Amara realized she had stepped into a new life. A life where she was no longer defined by her parents' decisions or limited by their control. She held Jabari's hand tightly, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and joy that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in weeks. His eyes met hers, full of love and understanding, and she knew she was truly seen and valued. Amara had lost nothing, she had gained everything. She was wealthier than she had ever imagined, proud of the dignity she had preserved, and secure in a marriage built on respect, trust, and unwavering love. As applause and cheers rang through the hall, Amara took a deep breath, savoring the feeling of freedom. For the first time, she walked forward not as a daughter bound by expectation, but as a woman who chose her own path, supported by a partner who had chosen her happiness over everything else. In that moment, she knew her life had changed forever, and nothing or no one could take that triumph away.